Hey YouTube, it's time for another video. It's been a while, a couple of months, but yeah, financial year end is busy. 9 to 5 jobs are busy. But hey, here I am. I have a couple things kind of in the pipeline. I've been working on one project which we'll start to see build logs of. But to tide you over, I've got this video about the Uting F24-12S, I guess remote control, remote crane control. I'm not quite sure what to call it yet, but I guess long story short is it's a remote control RF pendant, in this case VHF, that's powered by a couple AA batteries, and it enables you to remote control devices. From an integration standpoint, it's fairly easy to use. You give it either 18 to 65 volts AC or DC, or you've got a switch to tap internally to 65 through 440 volts, and then you can drop this in wherever you want, and you've got a whole bunch of dry contacts. I guess caveats to put on display right out the gate. This is totally not UL or CSA approved. It is at best CE or China export approved. But I mean, for low voltage DC projects and non-safety critical applications, it wouldn't be a bad way to go to remote control devices and get a nice, fairly sturdy RF control pendant in your hand. I kind of sprung for the all extras just to see at the very best what I could get. And if you look on AliExpress, you can get a whole bunch of results for remote control, crane controller, or whatever. But after some digging, it seems like this company, Uting, they make the best you can get out of China. It even comes with probably a very boilerplate, QC certificate. I wouldn't put it past them to actually do the QC testing in this case. But yeah, let's dig right into it, and let's not beat about the bush any longer. The control pendant side, you've got on this model a whole bunch of buttons, as well as a start and a function button, an emergency stop, which is a push and twist to unlock, as well as a key. It takes two AA batteries through a door on the bottom. All right, you just gotta unscrew that, put your batteries in. But more about the functionality itself in the pendant. So I'm going to disable it first. Maybe I can zoom in here to actually show and focus onto, there we go. So if I press any button when the system's not enabled or armed, it just blinks red at that. I've actually had batteries loaded in this as well for about a month now, and the batteries haven't run down, so the sleep function in the microcontroller actually is set up properly, and it's not draining a bunch of power when it's not in use. Either way, disable the e-stop. This key is also got to be in the on position. You can also remove the key so that you can, I guess, disable the control pendant when you want to keep it locked out, but really you should be locking it out at the source of the energy. Let me zoom back out here for you. And focus. There we go. So I suppose the arm function is really a toggle and hold relay latch. You press the start button and it actually enables all of the other contacts on here. Without that, you wouldn't actually be able to use any of these other buttons. And pressing this button actually does close that contact again, so it could be an actual warning horn or whatever that you're about to start using the crane. Hold it down and just let people in the room know that this machine's about to start moving. Then you've got pairs of buttons here. The interesting thing is that you can actuate either of these buttons on their own, and you can actuate any number of the rows together, but these two each row is actually a pair of contacts, and they actually lock themselves out. So chances are it's using pulse train over amplitude modulation, possibly frequency modulation on the RF. I don't have a scope that's high enough to actually probe it, and actually my old 25 megahertz scope just died, so I can't show you that part of it. But it's interesting that the rows lock each other out, but all of each pair locks themselves out, but each set of rows can be activated in combination all the way up to all 5, plus this function button on the corner here. Either way, you can hold it down and you start to see a green button blinking, or a green LED blinking, letting you know that it's working properly. But interestingly enough, if you lose power to this, right, by taking the batteries out, I'm not going to do that because I'm going to save some time, the unit actually stays armed, right? To disable this, you actually have to either remove the key or press the E-stop to send the disable signal to this via RF. So it's not intrinsically safe or fail-safe, where if you lose power to the controller, it gets the kill signal, and if for whatever reason the relays get latched on, that might be an issue. But without further ado, I'm just going to dig right into this. I've got a 24-volt power supply running this unit. Well, I guess more from the outside first. Interestingly enough, it came with these rubber vibration mounts, which probably would help take some of the vibration away from the unit. It actually looks like these are molded. It came with these little plastic feet, I guess if you're doing some work on the test bench, but you can unscrew that, and then it's got, captive. It looks like these are M5 or M6. M6 screws probably, because it's coming out of China. So it does come with vibration isolators. It's not too bad. As well as what I presume this cover here is actually to allow the unit to kind of breathe. The RF antenna in this case is actually an old-fashioned F connector, like you would see on your old cable TV. They're cheap, but again, this is VHF, so it's more than capable of handling the signal. The unit is definitely not IP, probably more than 45 or 55 rated, but there's no specific rating from the manufacturer, and actually no, on the case they do claim it is an IP65. It's hard to see here, but they do claim it's an IP65 case. I have my doubts, but we'll see. In the meantime, it's not high impact. I wouldn't put it in a critical situation. In China you might. Let's see, right on the inside we have PP/PA plus 30% GF, so it's actually not that bad of a piece of plastic. Also looks like it's got a gasket wired in here, so looks like this front LED is just 2 wires. There's nothing fancy or special about it. A couple resistors for it. And then we get into the real guts of this thing. So this is all very tightly integrated. A lot of the pictures I've seen from other made in China specials is actually pretty piss poor. So this actually looks like it's been properly done. There's a switch mode. There's actually even, maybe I can zoom in here. I don't know if I've got enough light. Focus a little bit. There are actually isolation slits cut into the PCB, but I have my doubts whether that's actually enough isolation. You can see isolation slit right there, going off to the side. But remember, this unit has on the side a rating to 440 volts DC. Right? So I kind of have my doubts. Anyways, wrong way. There we go. Alright, so digging right back into this. Also, the hinge is just a piece of plastic, so that'll probably go after a few uses. You're not really supposed to go back in and out of this thing. The RF receiver is actually shielded, which in other pictures of other ones online, they aren't. Let me zoom in a little more here so you guys can see. so it's actually shielded. They do have instructions as well to change the crystal, so you can use a different frequency control pendant. They've got this other little antenna in here. I'm not sure if this is supposed to be the counterpoise for the RF. There's a little spring antenna on the side. Not quite sure what's going on there. Regardless, you've got banks of relays. They have versions where there's dual speed, where if you hold down the button longer, it gives you a different speed. Other than that, the 24-12S, they actually list on the wiring diagram here, if I can zoom in and focus, the 24, oh, there we go, 24-12S, they do list all of these terminals and which contacts and relays are available. Interestingly enough, there are fuses on several points of the circuit. In addition to that, looks like I'm going to focus. There we go. They do have an additional link here if you want to put a different, I guess, different common terminal on this contact for up versus down. Not quite sure why they put that in there, but you know what? For people that wire up cranes all the time, I'm probably sure there's a good reason why they'd give you a link to snip and wire in your own connection. Regardless of that, let's see. Looking in closer, it looks like they've got a whole bunch of... Okay, there's the micro. Let's see if I can get my camera screen here to show what's going on. There's the microcontroller. Right, quartz crystal right next to it. And then probably what are some ULN 2003s or something to drive the relays, because we've got a whole bunch of resistors and the traces disappear off into the board, but it looks like they all do eventually make it to these relays. And then the rest of this section of the board is all just the switch mode power supply. So internally it's not too bad. They also have two connectors here for a low or a high voltage. Right now I've got it on the low and I'm feeding it DC, but it appears to also take AC, quite a wide range. And then, like I said, it has these plain old standard glass fuses. Interesting and nice that they include them, though I wouldn't necessarily trust the circuitry here to handle it. And I think the spec on these is at least 5 or 10 amps per relay. I believe it's 10 amps actually. Oh wait, it says on the side of the relay 10 amps. Anyway. And a nice touch that I didn't see in other cheap versions online is that internally they actually have LEDs for each one of the relays that get triggered. So you can actually tell what contact is being used. So more on the feature where it gets jammed. There's up, there's down. If I jam up and down at the same time, both of them cut out. So at least from a functionality standpoint, you're not going to get weird, unexpected behavior. They lock themselves out, but once you press, so I can get this in screen, you press one, and you press the other one, and it locks it out. Then no combination of the two will allow you to trigger it until you release both of them to reset. So that's not entirely unexpected. Other than that, you've got a cable gland, which actually appears to have a rubber O-ring in there. It's hard to see by camera, but trust me, it's there. Yeah, and otherwise a fairly substantial wiring harness. And actually, each one of the wires does have the wire number corresponding to the contact here on the wiring diagram. So, you know what? For about 320 bucks Canadian, granted our Canadian dollar's not been the most stellar performing currency recently, it's not bad, right? If you don't need proportional control like a hobby remote control and you want something super durable, then this might not be a bad way to go. There are much cheaper versions, especially sub $100 versions, where, okay, the internal build quality might not be so nice, but, you know, if you get the Uting brand, you know, the manual actually doesn't have very much English. It's actually half decent for made in China. Full disclosure, ethnically, I am a Canadian-born Chinese individual. So I'm not going to pull any punches here. Most of the stuff from China, well, you get what you pay for at the end of the day. So internal build quality's okay. There's some things they could have done better, but I mean, there's some parts that are actually glued and potted in place. So another interesting note is that Uting does have a piece of software and a serial cable you can get, and the serial port is up in the top corner right here. Right, that little white rectangular box there. That's the serial port. You can actually plug in a cable and configure certain behaviors when you press buttons on the remote. So that's the control box, and I'm going to close this thing up real quick. Oh, and I guess another thing too is these screws are a self-threading screw meant for plastic. They're not made with threaded inserts. They're not machine screws going into press fit inserts in the plastic. So if you go in and out of this box too many times, you will wear it out. But once you set the voltage tap on the power supply, there's no real reason to go back in and out. So I can see why they cut a couple cents out of that. It's not nice to see, but you know, at the end of the day, people have to run a business too. So yeah, on the remote side, pushing this aside, gonna need a different screwdriver. So here's what I said about the batteries. If you lose power to the remote, you don't actually. It's not intrinsically safe or fail-safe. So here, I've removed the batteries. I've got no control. I can hit the E-stop and the unit's still armed. Right? If there was a second remote or whatever, you might hit the E-stop, and you know, you might try and trigger it to stop. But if your batteries die at the most inopportune time, someone might get hurt again if it's a non-fail-safe situation. There's also another serial port here to program it through the same software. Alright, here we go. Okay, so the E-stop mechanism here appears to be part of the lid. Let me zoom right in here for you guys. The E-stop mechanism is part of the lid. And this key mechanism as well appears to be... Interestingly enough, it actually appears to be magnetic. It's really hard to see, so I'm going to zoom right in for you guys. Okay, so. There, it should be in focus. If I turn this, you can see that silvery metal object there. And I'm betting if I touch this with a screwdriver, yeah, it's magnetic. It's got a grabby hold on it. So I bet if we look at its counterpart, yep, there it is. Yeah, let's get some nice, good and close-up shots of this. So, looks like here we've got a little tiny reed switch. We've got our E-stop button here. We've got a bunch of these buttons that have silicone bumpers on them. They're just standard. Oh, let me just go wrong way here. Other left. Yeah, these are just standard tactile buttons with little silicone bumpers, but hey, it's actually, from a button feel, it's got a very nice push to it. And the buttons on the other side, they appear to just push through the case, and I don't know if they're very weather sealed, but I'm not going to tamper with that too much. When the lanyard fell off, but okay, that's fine. Okay, so let's go further. What do we got here? Crystal, another crystal. So two different crystals here. I guess one's for the RF, and one's for the Oh, I'm really getting far off base here. 2 crystals. 1 and 2. One's probably for the microcontroller, the other one's for the RF. So let's go a little further. Get to, because I'm not. Alright, so that should be all the screws for this board. Let's carefully prise this from the inside. Let's see what we got. Alright, so we actually have, wow, real connectors. They actually made it so you could disconnect the internal components a little bit. You know, it may not sound like a lot, but it's an extra couple cents and it's a little bit of extra labor. So here's the reverse of that board. I'll zoom right in here for y'all. Alright, so what do we got here? This is the connector to the, seemingly to the antenna here. We've got a microcontroller. Interesting, it's an M430F1101A from Texas Instruments. So there's actually a real branded chip in there, and a Philips chip in there as well. Got a battery connector up here, and a couple other markings internally, encoder model, VHF, UHF markings, which weren't populated. And then a very hard to decipher set of markings on this chip up here. This guy looks like it maps over to the antenna. There's a little tiny inductor right above it. So there's an LC network going on right here, right before the antenna connector. So it means VHF, you don't really need too many impedance controlled traces in this neighborhood. It works. For range, I haven't tested it yet, but I'm sure if I have issues, I will report back. But otherwise, it seems alright. And then from the inside here, we've got PBT plus 30% GF. I don't know what PBT is. Is that ABS? Polybutyl something? Polybutyl toluene? A couple molding stamps here of what's inside. Here's the emergency stop. And again, the glass reed magnetic switch. I guess it could have been a Hall effect switch. I guess the glass reed switches are cheaper. And then just the antenna is bolted in there, kind of non-ceremoniously. And then we got more of this gasketing material here. So, I mean, it looks like the controller would also stand up to at least IP60 something. Yeah, so not bad actually for $300 Canadian. Let me zoom back out here and start to put it back together. Yeah, not too shabby in all entirety. The fact that it's got little connectors on the inside of the board caught me off guard. It's actually got SMT components in there that do not look like they're, rejects from other production lines. It actually looks like this company bothered to design their own products, and their products are actually getting ripped off by other Chinese manufacturers. How's that for a slice of irony? But yeah, not at all hard to reassemble here. Nice and easy. So yeah, that's been this that's the little, I guess, review and teardown video for these RF crane controllers. Your mileage may vary depending on the exact model you get, from who you get it from, how many features or functions you get, the type of controller. But remember the golden rule: when you get what you pay for. If you pay $50, you're not going to get the same level of quality. So I'd take it on caution. I took the risk, and I guess I'm surprisingly, or I guess I'm surprised by how well this actually turned out. And I'll report back once I've integrated this into a real project, how well the overall performance turns out. So I don't really have much. I guess one more thing is this cover here. They actually zoom right back in here. So on this cover, 2 terminals here for the batteries. and a captive thumb screw. And that takes actually a little bit of effort, and again, you've got more gasket material seated in this rim. So again, it does appear to actually be intended for IP60 something. And then on the inside here, one of the batteries actually blocked out here. It only needs 2 AA's, but at some point they had models or software or hardware that required 4 AA's, because the internal compartments are designed for 4. Now you only need 2, so maybe they did a hardware iteration where they, switched from 5 volts to 3.3 and they're saving that much more power, but you know what? Good on them for that. So that is pretty much everything I've got for this video. It's 31 minutes, so hopefully if you've watched this long, you haven't fallen asleep entirely. Thanks for watching, and if you like this video and more, please subscribe, like, and comment.